I walked in on my fiancée and my son. Her excuse? What was I supposed to do? Raising my son alone was never easy, but I did everything I could to be the father he deserved. When I met her, I thought I had finally found someone who would stand by us, someone who understood what it meant to be a family. She promised to love me, to care for my son as if he were her own. I believed her. But trust is a dangerous thing. Being a single father wasn't easy, but I did everything I could to give my son a good life. I worked long hours, took extra shifts, and sacrificed my own needs to make sure he had everything he needed. It wasn't just about providing. It was about being there, about making sure he never felt alone. Then I met her. She came into our lives at the perfect time. She was warm, understanding, and patient, not just with me, but with my son, too. It felt like she truly cared, like she wanted to be part of our family, not just my partner. She helped with homework, made his favorite meals, even showed up at his school events when I couldn't. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. I thought I had found someone who would stand by us, someone who understood what it meant to love, to commit, to build a future together. She wasn't just my fiancée. She was my partner in everything. When I was exhausted from work, she took care of things at home. When I worried about finances, she reminded me that we were in this together. She made life easier. And my son? He adored her. He trusted her. I thought we were building something real. I thought we were a family. At first, everything felt normal. If anything, I was grateful. She had taken such an active role in our lives, in my son's life. It felt like we were finally a real family. But looking back, the red flags were there. They weren't obvious, not at first. Just little things that, on their own, didn't mean much. The way she'd linger a little too long when saying goodnight to him. The way their conversations would continue even after I had left the room. The inside jokes that I wasn't a part of. I brushed it off. Because why wouldn't I? They were bonding. That's what I wanted, wasn't it? For them to trust each other, to get along. But then, things started to change. She became distant. Not all at once, just gradually like a slow fade. We used to talk about everything, but suddenly, our conversations felt different. Shorter. Shallower. And my son? He was quieter around me, too. At first, I thought it was just teenage mood swings. Maybe he was growing up, needing more space. I told myself not to overthink it. But then came the late nights. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear them talking downstairs. Just whispers. Too quiet for me to make out the words. And when I asked her about it, she just smiled. Laughed even. Oh, we were just talking. Nothing serious, just bonding. And I wanted to believe her. But then there were the moments I couldn't ignore. Her phone would buzz at odd hours and she'd smile at the screen, but never say who it was. If I asked, she'd brush it off. Just a friend, she'd say. Just something unimportant. And maybe the worst part? The way she started pulling away from me. She used to reach for my hand absent-mindedly, lean into me on the couch, kiss me for no reason at all. But now she barely touched me, barely looked at me the same way. And when I finally confronted her, she sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. You're imagining things. You're just stressed from work. You're reading too much into it. And for a while, I believed her. Because I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative, the idea that something was happening right under my nose, was too painful to consider. Doubt is a slow poison. It starts as a whisper, a nagging feeling in the back of your mind. But the more you ignore it, the louder it gets. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid. But the signs were everywhere, and no matter how much I tried to push them aside, they kept piling up. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. It was late, past midnight. I had gotten up to grab a glass of water when I noticed the glow of a screen coming from the living room. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. It was her. Sitting on the couch, phone in hand, typing, smiling. Something in me clenched. I wasn't the jealous type, but this was different. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to say something. But before I could, she locked her phone and turned her head. She saw me. And for a split second, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of panic. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. She forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, as if nothing was wrong. I wanted to let it go. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen her reaction, hadn't felt the shift in the air. But my instincts wouldn't let me. So the next morning, when she was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone. I hesitated. My hands were shaking. I told myself that if I found nothing, I would apologize. To her, to myself, for ever doubting her. But then I saw it. Her messages were locked, but her notifications weren't. And right there, at the top of the screen, was a message from my son. I can't stop thinking about last night. I froze. My stomach twisted. My breath caught in my throat. My own son? My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe it was a joke. Something harmless. But then another message popped up. "Are you coming to my room again tonight?" My hands went cold. I scrolled up, my fingers numb. More messages. Some short, some long. But they all said the same thing. Things I couldn't even process. I wish we didn't have to hide this. I can't believe how good it feels. I don't regret it. The room felt like it was closing in. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a joke. This was real. And then I heard the water shut off. The bathroom door creaked open. Footsteps. I barely had time to lock the phone and put it back before she stepped into the room. She was humming, towel wrapped around her hair, moving as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I stood there, staring at her, at the woman I was supposed to marry, the woman who had promised to be a mother to my son. And I realized something right then. She had no idea I knew. Denial really is a powerful thing. Even after reading those messages, my mind fought against the truth. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't really there. I spent the whole day watching them. Not obviously, but I noticed everything. The way they avoided eye contact when I was in the room. The way my son tensed when she spoke to me. The way her smile felt forced, like she was playing a role instead of just being. I needed proof. Real proof. So, I waited. Night fell, and the house settled into silence. I pretended to sleep, lying in bed with my heart hammering so hard I thought it might wake her. Then, just past midnight, she shifted beside me. Carefully, slowly. She thought I was asleep. She slipped out of bed without a sound. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. Then I got up. I moved quietly, my bare feet pressing against the cool floor. Every step felt heavier than the last. My body knew what my mind refused to accept. I reached my son's room. The door was shut. A part of me hoped it was locked, that maybe I wouldn't have to see it with my own eyes, that I could walk away, pretend I never read those messages, pretend my life wasn't about to shatter. But the handle turned, and when I pushed the door open, the world stopped. There they were, naked, tangled together, my fiancé, my son. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred at the edges, my hands clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. And then she turned, saw me, and she didn't scream, didn't jump away in shock or horror. She just looked at me, calm, cold. And then she said it. What was I supposed to do? Not, "I'm sorry," not, "This isn't what it looks like." Just that. Like it was my fault, like she expected me to understand. Time didn't move. I stood there, frozen in place, staring at the two people I loved most in the world. The two people who had just destroyed me. Her words echoed in my head. What was I supposed to do? She didn't even try to deny it. Didn't show an ounce of guilt. And my son? He didn't look shocked or ashamed. He just sat there, gripping the sheets, his face unreadable. Something inside me snapped. I turned and walked out. I don't even remember how I got back to my room, but the next thing I knew, I was throwing our framed pictures to the floor, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. I texted her first, 5 words, "Get your things, get out." Then I turned to my son's door. He hadn't followed me. He hadn't even moved. I could feel the rage bubbling up, but underneath it all there was something worse. A hollow, gut-wrenching emptiness. I opened the door just enough to look at him, and in a voice that didn't even feel like my own, I said, "You're dead to me." His face finally changed. A flicker of something, shock maybe even regret. I didn't care anymore. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. I wasn't even angry at that point. I was just done. And then I heard her footsteps. She had actually come back to our bedroom like nothing happened, like she thought we could talk this through. I turned to face her, and before she could even open her mouth, I spoke first. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." Her expression didn't change. She folded her arms, tilted her head, and smirked. "You think you can just throw me out? After everything I've done for you?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Done for me?" I repeated. "Like what? Destroying my family? Sleeping with my son?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." And that was it, the last straw. I stood up, stepped so close she had to back up. My voice was calm, too calm. "You have 10 minutes to leave, or I swear to God I'll make you wish you never met me." And for the first time that night, I saw something in her eyes. Fear. She grabbed her things and left. No begging, no apologies. Just a final glance over her shoulder before she was gone. And my son. He tried to talk to me the next morning. Tried to explain. I told him I didn't care. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just told him the truth. "You're not my son anymore." Then I left. I wasn't the type for revenge. At least I hadn't been before. But something about the way she smirked at me that night, the way she thought she got away with it, no, I couldn't let that slide. I knew exactly how to ruin her. First, I made sure she left with nothing. I had been smart enough to keep everything in my name, my house, my car, my bank accounts. She had relied on me for everything, and now she had nothing. But that wasn't enough. I found out where she was staying, with a friend, one she had gossiped about to me countless times, a friend who had no idea what she had done. So I sent the messages, screenshots of everything, every dirty text between her and my son, every sickening message. She was kicked out within the hour. Then came her job. She had landed it because of me, through one of my connections. And when I made a single call, that connection cut her loose. No job, no home, no money. And my son? I cut him off completely, blocked his number, made sure he knew I wanted nothing to do with him. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she was struggling, sleeping on couches, barely scraping by. My son had dropped out of college. His future, gone. Did I feel bad? Not even a little. Revenge was satisfying, but it wasn't enough, because even after everything I was still broken. I took time away from everything, moved to a different city, cut off old ties, started fresh. Therapy helped, the gym helped. Hell, even just sitting alone in silence helped. But the real healing came when I stopped asking why. Why she did it. Why he did it. Why I hadn't seen the signs sooner. None of it mattered. What mattered was that I had survived, that I had built a new life for myself, a life without them. And one day, years later, I got a message from him. It was short, simple. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time, then without a second thought, I deleted it, because I had moved on. And they were just a story now. At the end of the day, betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you who truly belongs in your life. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have forgiven them or walked away for good? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story left you shocked, hit that like button. It really helps support the channel and brings more stories like this to you. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Because sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction.